Propagated roots. This is something that those of you who are, well, everybody's doing the bee plant, the bee category plant, where you're doing vegetative propagation. This is what you're going to be taking advantage of most likely, okay, in getting that plant to grow. You're going to be taking a leaf portion, the top portion of the plant. This is often where you would eat the root that's attached, or you would have eaten maybe a fruit that's attached, and you're still taking kind of the leafy part of a stem that was attached to that plant, to that fruit, and you're going to try to get that to make new roots. And that is going to, those roots are going to develop from these what's called adventitious buds. Okay. Well, actually, I think I'm ahead of myself because this is actually on the root developing. Okay, well, I think, well, it's a future slide. If not, I'll talk about it when I find out it's not on a future slide. But um, actually, these are additional roots, okay, that develop into suckers. So this is not quite what I was getting ready to talk about yet. Um, so you've got your standard root, you've got your plant, you got your standard root, whatever type of root that that particular plant has, and went too far. Um, these plants will then develop additional root type things, okay, from these adventitious buds. Um, and they can develop into these things called suckers, which then they call an aerial stem. And it's like, well, is that a stem or is that a root? Yeah, okay. Anyway, um, and some of these they'll grow on top of the ground. Some of these will grow under the ground. We'll get into different types of those, I think, later. But these are common in fruit trees. They're common in some other types of trees too. I get them in some shrubs. Um, they have different terminology usually when we talk about them in grasses, but these are things where one plant sends out these adventitious roots that can then shoot up another plant, okay, another tree, another uh, shrub, whatever it is, grass. So those are why they're called propagated roots, is because they're you can get a whole new plant off of this one bud from an already existing plant root. Okay, so you might, the three of you who were in my biology class last semester might remember me talking about the oldest living tree on the planet, okay, that we know about, and that's the bristlecone pine in New Mexico. It's older by the average that we think we've been able to determine so far on those without, like, killing them all or core sampling all of them, and we don't want to do that. Is that they're about 4,500 years old, and that's a little bit older than the oldest of the giant redwood, which are roughly 3,000 to 3,500 years old. Um, and what um, but the giant redbud, I was talking about the giant redwood, sorry, not redbud, redwood, um, isn't the oldest, but it's considered the largest by many people because of this massive size of these trees, that they're largest. So we got the oldest, we got the oldest and oldest and largest type living thing on the planet. The the redwood has had that status of being the largest challenged. Some botanists want to say that there are aspen groves in the Rocky Mountains that are larger than the giant sequoia or the redwood trees. And you could go, aspens don't get that big. What are they talking about? Well, that's why I use the term aspen grove. It's because they're looking at that and they're saying that if you find like the center of the grove or the original tree, that entire stand of aspen trees are actually all one plant if you look at it in a certain way, because one started and it sent off these propagative roots, and then here comes up a couple of more trees. They send off propagated roots to more trees, more trees, more trees. So you have this entire stand of trees that are all interconnected from an original root. I kind of share, basically, they're all connected. So they say if you just took the sheer mass of all of that and compare it to the mass of one giant redwood tree, the aspen grove is much bigger in mass. Okay, so that's that's the argument, and then that kind of begs the question. Well, okay, this is a propagative root. Does it go out and just extend that plant into another, projection of that plant, or are we actually getting a new plant off of this? In most cases, if you went and you cut the roots in between the original and the new, the plant that came up from that sucker, um, at a certain point, they would continue to live independently of each other. All right. So at that point, you're kind of like, is that really still all one entity, or is it just interconnected offspring? Okay. So there you go. A little debate that botanists have as to what do we consider one organism and what do we consider a community, and where's that break going to occur? Okay. So anyway, um, that's where the um, yeah, status of the redwood's been challenged a little bit in two places now. It's not the oldest because bristlecone pine are older. It's maybe not the largest because aspen groves. Okay, pneumatophores. Uh, so in plants with roots growing in water, you get these spongy roots that extend above the water's surface and enhance gas exchange between atmosphere and subsurface roots. And the example they're showing you here is the mangrove. But unless you're from like what, Florida, the Gulf Coast area, you may have never seen a mangrove. What you might have seen here that has these what look called knees like our knee in our leg, knees that stick up out of the water. Here they're shown it dry, the water's receded, but in wet times of the year this would be underwater, and these little knees stick up and allow for gas exchange to occur. Also, water is probably the soil underneath is probably really saturated with water, and so the roots have to breathe. Trees can drown. You know, if they stand the roots underwater too long and they don't have any of these like knees sticking up above the water to do the exchange, they can drown. So a flood that lasts for a very long period of time will kill trees. And you may have seen that if you were living in Miami um, back in like 2007 when we had that big flood, and those waters stayed long enough that it did kill some trees in some areas that maintained that water stand for a long time. So the tree you probably would have seen in this area is the cypress. Okay. Cypress trees are sometimes planted in parks around um, park ponds, park lakes, um, because they're kind of pretty. They also help, all these roots help hold the bank so that um, you don't get water eroding the bank away. Okay. But the bald cypress is actually the type of cypress that produces those knees that will stick up out of the water. Okay. But that's what they are, and that's why they're there. Is that provides an ability for the roots to exchange gas with the atmosphere, even though the tree's mostly standing in water, and the tree won't drown. Okay, then we have the aerial roots. Okay, orchids. Oh, I should have brought my orchid in and shown it for a show and tell. Might have to yell at one of my girls. See if I can get him here. I don't think I'm gonna get any help. Okay, so I have an orchid that I bought about a year ago, and it's in beautiful bloom right now. And you can see these aerial roots sticking off of it. I'm gonna just get up and go get it here in a second myself. Okay, um, so in orchids, I think they're referred to as the velamen roots. Mine look kind of similar to this, a little different. What we have is from the epidermis. There's several layers. They're several layers thick. These are kind of thick and tough looking and feeling, and that helps reduce the water loss. But again, these are usually tropical area plants. They're going to grow in areas where there may be sudden downpours of rain and lots of water, and then nothing. But you got to survive those times of saturated soil. Um, Corn has prop roots, and if you've ever grown corn, it's tall. It's a grass. Strong winds can really uh, blow it over really easy. That's called lodging. Okay, they can lodge. Um, and so these prop roots help prevent that from happening. Um, and then we have ivies. And of course, ivy, the aerial roots on the ivy is going to help it to um, climb. Okay, all of your vines that climb up walls and things, rocks, they're going to have usually a little kind of a hook shape to them, and um, that's their purpose. So now we see some of those number four categories, right? Those other purposes that I never can remember. Oh, finally got somebody. Got busy. She was busy doing something. She finished it. Okay. So contractile roots. These are seen in some herbaceous dicots and monocots. So grasses, and then your dicots like maybe you know clover, henbit, these things that grow down uh, on the in the ground but aren't woody. Okay. Here's my orchid. All right. If you can see, let me get this in here where you can see it. Okay. See these things sticking up here? Kind of look rope-like. That's what those are. Those are the velamen. Okay. And they're very tough, very stiff and very tough feeling. Okay. All right. And yeah, I'm really proud of this thing. It's just got a beautiful bloom going on right now. And that just happened like in the past few weeks. I had buds on it and then suddenly they just exploded a couple of days ago. So
It's very pretty.
thanks. So what contractile roots do is as the plant grows, they grow and then they shorten. You had that region of elongation, but these are going to have the ability to also contract their cells into smaller size, and that's going to actually pull the stem down into the ground, into the soil. And this just helps strengthen their position, the plant's position in the soil and the ground. And lily bulbs experience this. They're pulled deeper into the soil each year. Buttress roots. We have tropical trees that have these because one of the things you need to understand about tropical, what we call often rainforest type soils, is that they're very shallow. The nutrients don't go very far below the surface. We have a lot of things growing in the rainforest, but the soils are very poor, and the leaves and the stuff that fall from the canopy, as it's called, above, fall down on the ground and decay right there on the surface, and then those nutrients are just immediately kind of used by the plants. So almost all uh, the roots are pretty close to the surface. Okay, so they can access that really fast. I mean, they're all competing for it. Um, and there's no need to send roots deeper down into the soil because there's just not anything there. And this is one of the problems that uh, you know we're experiencing. People kind of knew it was going to happen in advance anyway, but whoever listens to scientists, right? Okay, I mean, look at the COVID thing. Whoever listened to scientists, yeah. So anyway, we knew that the value of the soil would deplete very quickly. If you go and you clear cut rainforest and you go and you plant crops, you're going to get a couple of good harvests off of that, and then you're going to use up all the nutrients in the soil, and that's it. And and it's going to take generations to get the rainforest established back, if you can at all. And so that's like that's what's kind of going on in tropical areas right now, especially in South America, where they're doing this. They're kind of trying to turn it into grasslands so they can have cattle. And again, the grasses they just don't grow in that soil. They need deeper roots. They need to be deeper rooted, and then they need the nutrients deeper down. And if you don't have all that stuff falling down off that canopy, you're not getting the detritus, as it's called, that organic matter decaying to put those nutrients back in. So you're just depleting everything within a few seasons of growth. Say, well, we put fertilizer on it. Yeah, we only fertilize for usually about three things, and there's a lot more that goes into the soils. But that's leading into the next topic of soils, so we'll just kind of move on from there. But because these soils are so thin and all the nutrients are right there, the shallow rooting is so thin, you get these really tall trees growing up. usually the trees kind of protect each other from wind and things like that, but still they need more support than the roots are giving them down in the soil. So they're going to have these roots up on the surface, okay, that provide this support instead. And so we call them buttress roots. And I don't know if you know anything about medieval architecture or anything like that, but if you like old cathedrals, old European cathedrals, uh, those were built in what's called the Gothic style architecture. And the breakthrough of the Gothic architecture was they had these arches coming out that supported the walls. And they were called flying buttresses. Okay. And that allowed the wall to be thinner and still be tall and support a heavy roof because most of those roofs at that time had lead. Okay, kind of lead shingles on there for the lead slate slab lead or slate slabs for the roof. Um, so anyway, those prior to that, the walls had to be, I mean, feet thick to support the roof. And then when they figured out we could do these buttresses, okay. Well, I don't know where they got the idea, if they got it out of nature or not, but they could have, okay, because this is it's physics. Physics works. Whether we're using it, nature uses it. Like I said, we get a lot of ideas from looking at things in nature. So these buttress roots are going to do that same type of thing. They're going to allow a tree to be supported much higher up and have weight much higher up without going down in the ground as far. And of course, then parasitic roots. We have lots of different plants that will, bore into basically another plant in order to pull nutrients out, and they're going to often do that with a root. So these are produced by plats. I don't think we talked about that as a cell type in the previous tissues and cells definition. Um, but some of the specialized names that are given to these parasitic type roots are called daughters, broom rapes, and pine drops. Okay. Yeah, I probably won't make you memorize those. Just know parasitic roots exist and kind of what they do. Most of these don't have any chlorophyll because they don't need to be making their own food. They're going to get their nutrients from their host. Um, so they're dependent on the chlorophyll bearing plants for nutrition. And your Haustoria. Now, there's a term you might need to know because that's one that you see used a bit in botany as a field for sure. Haustoria are peg-like extensions that allow a plant to parasitize a host. That's what they're going to stick in there for the most part, uh, and then be able to absorb nutrients through that. So here's some terminology to help you out with some things. We have a saprophyte, and saprophyte, those from biology may remember that term. The fungi are saprophytic. They obtain their nutrients from organic matter. They decompose it outside of themselves with enzymes and then bring it in. And of course, saprophytes can grow on plants and be parasitic. I mean, kind of in a sense, fungi can. Okay. Um, we have epiphytes, and these grow in other plants but obtain moisture and nutrients from the environment. Okay. And orchids are given as an example of that. There are some orchids, not all, but some are going to be epiphytes. They're going to grow in relation to another plant. And an epiparasite and mycoheterotroph are terms that are sometimes used to describe plants that obtain some or all of their carbon from a fungus rather than photosynthesis. So it's really odd situations here going on. But Indian pipe is an example of that one. And I probably ought to go get a picture of an Indian pipe at some point. It's kind of an interesting looking plant. I'm not that familiar with it, but I have seen pictures of it. It's one of those common examples. Okay, mycorrhizae. Again, that's another example of another example that we had in biology last semester. Um, this is fungi that form a mutualistic association with plant roots. And I think I mentioned that it was useful for phosphorus poor soils. Again, soils that didn't have a lot of phosphorus, it would help the plant survive in that situation. And I kind of left it at that. So here's a little bit more detail on that. A little repeat and more detail. So this is a mutualistic association. So let's review our associations. We have mutualistic, commensalistic, and parasitic. Okay, so we just talked about parasitic. That's where something is living off of a host and it's usually detrimental to the host. If it doesn't actually kill the host, it's going to stunt the host. It's going to drain off of it some way, keep it from growing fully or producing as much offspring or something. It's make it more susceptible to disease. It's harmful to the host. Commensalistic is where the organism is living in relation to another organism and it doesn't help it or hurt it. Okay, it's benefiting, but it's not doing anything detrimental or helpful to the other plant. Some some people, some scientists say that doesn't exist. That really doesn't exist. If we're looking at commensalism, then we're just not seeing the whole picture. There's something else going on. And we're not catching it. Um, I don't know if I buy into that or not, but that's a little bit of an argument there. And then we have this mutualistic. Mutualistic is where both organisms benefit. Okay, one does something for the other one, and in exchange gets something else. Okay, so both the fungus and the root are going to benefit in this relationship. The fungus is going to facilitate absorption and concentration of nutrients, especially phosphorus for the roots, and the plant is going to give the fungus some sugars and amino acids. Okay, um, and so that's why it's mutualistic. Now, plant's going to give up some sugar, but typically plants produce more sugars than they need anyway. And I don't know about the amino acids. That could maybe be that the plant is giving up a little bit in exchange for. And if it were growing in ideal soil with lots of phosphorus, it would do better without the fungus, maybe. But again, we're talking about growing in a situation where it wouldn't otherwise be able to grow. Um, so plants with mycorrhizae develop few root hairs compared with those growing without the associated fungus, possibly because they don't need it as much. They've got something else helping them absorb that, so they don't need to put their energy into developing all these extra root hairs. And unfortunately, though, these are particularly susceptible to acid rain. Okay, probably because that's going to affect the fungi uh, earlier than um, well, if it affects either one of them, it's going to mess up the relationship. Okay, either way. Okay, so this is going to be our, um, whoops, I went too far. There we are. Picture here of what's going on. So this is the root. And this is the, yeah, mycorrhizal roots. Okay, I think really what this is trying to show you, though I'm not really sure it's doing terribly good job of it. The fungus, if you remember right, the fungus has a body that's called a mycorrhizae, and the mycorrhizae is made up of these individual hairs called a hyphae, or hypha is one, hyphae plural. And little hyphae are what's going to stick into the root of the plant. But they're only going to go partway in, and that's what this is trying to show you is that um, it'll go partway in, but it never goes right into the cortex. Okay, um, of the root. It just goes kind of into this outer part. So that's I think the point mostly of this illustration. At least that's what I want you to get out of it. Okay. Um, so just enough to get the sugar, but not enough to damage anything, and it doesn't. I don't think it taps in even directly to the phloem. It kind of takes what the plant is laterally putting out into the root. Okay. And similar to but different, we have root nodules. Um, Plants cannot convert free nitrogen, and that's nitrogen gas, into usable form. So nitrogen is an important component of our amino acids, right? That had that little when I showed you the organic structure, we're doing organic chemistry. I showed you the structure of amino acids. They all had that amine group, and that amine group was a nitrogen with two hydrogens attached. Well, nitrogen has to come from somewhere, and uh, we nothing on this we're swimming in nitrogen. I mean, most of our atmosphere is nitrogen. Okay, it's more nitrogen than oxygen for sure. But we can't do anything with it. Okay, we can't take it in and do anything with it. Um, so we have to get that nitrogen from a source that's actually been combined with like oxygen. Okay, uh, in order to be able to use it to make amino acids. And so there are a few bacteria that produce enzymes that can do that. They can convert nitrogen into what's called nitrates. So that's a nitrogen with two oxygens attached. Nitrate, nitrite, three oxygens. Yeah. Okay. And some other nitrogenous substances. So you get nitrate, nitrite. There's two, the two and O3. Okay. And that can be absorbed by the roots, and that can be taken in and used to make organic compounds that need nitrogen. So um, root nodules can form. So that's what you see here in this picture, these root nodules. And that's where the bacteria live. We call it nitrogen fixing. It fixes it. It takes it from something that's not usable and fixes it so we can use it. Um, excuse me. So that's kind of where that term comes from. And that's they're going to live in these nodules and do that, and that benefits the plant. Okay. And specifically the legumes, which is a group of plants including your beans, all your beans, your soybeans, uh, yeah, legumes. They are known for having these root nodules that do this. And that also puts these nitrates into the soil. So I've talked about growing something on soil and depleting the nutrients out of the soil and not being able to put it back. If you rotate plants. So you grow like what around here will do is they'll grow one crop of wheat, and then they'll come back and behind that it's called double cropping because wheat gets harvested by June usually, and then you can come in and in June right behind it plant soybeans. Well, soybeans are a legume, and they have the ability to use root nodules and fix nitrogen. So that will put nitrogen back into the soil that the wheat took out. Okay, but that's only do nitrogen. You still have phosphate and phosphorus and other things that aren't getting necessarily put back in. But plowing under the stalks puts that plant debris back down into the soil where the soil bacteria will start decomposing that and releasing a lot of those nutrients back out into the soil as well. So that helps too. But the the nitrogen, okay. And now this when I was going through college with my agronomy degree, this was the thing. They said this is gonna it was kind of like thought this will solve all your nitrogen problems. Well, it didn't. We still had to fertilize with nitrogen fertilizers. Um, and I don't know if it's why they didn't teach it that way because they knew it at that time. But now we know that these really they help. They help put nitrogen back in the soil, but they don't replace enough. Okay, they don't replace as much as was used. Okay, but it definitely helps the soybean crop. Okay, to do better without the additional fertilizer. But the wheat's still gonna have to be fertilized, and in some cases, like I said, you still need it for the soybeans because it's just they need more. Okay. And of course, the relevance to us is we use a lot of these roots for food. So our root crops are carrots, sugar beets, turnips, horseradishes, cassava, which is what we get tapioca from, yams, and sweet potatoes. There is a difference. Okay. Um, Spices that we're pretty fond of is sassafras, sarsaparilla, and licorice, if you like those. I like all three of those. Most of my family doesn't. Um, I think everybody's okay with sassafras and sarsaparilla, but licorice is not a favorite except with me and one of my daughters. Um, Sarsaparilla is your main root flavoring for root beer, for the original root beer. Okay. Um, Actually, all three of those can be used to help with flavoring of root beer. And that's what root beer, that's how it got its name. You take roots and you flavor a carbonated drink out of actually it wasn't carbonated originally. Root beer was a mildly alcoholic beverage. All of our soda pops, I think I talked about that in biology class, all of our soda pops were originally mildly alcoholic because they were developed in days before we had the ability to bottle under pressure and stuff carbon dioxide into a sugared liquid. So instead, we brewed up this sugar beverage and then let it ferment a little bit, enough to produce the carbonation, and then we had this sweet, because the sugar, ferments and turns to alcohol, produces carbon dioxide also as a byproduct. We have this sweet carbonated beverage, but it would have a slight amount of alcohol on it. That's why they're called soft drinks instead of hard drinks. And depending on where you were, who you were, and your personal views, it was still, I think, considered some of an adult beverage, but it wasn't enough alcohol content to get drunk. And so in some cases, it was like soft drinks are okay for kids. Okay. um, but not everybody agreed with that. Okay. And
Coca-Cola,
huh?
Coca-Cola originally had cocaine in it.
Yep, that's right. A little bit of alcohol, a little bit of cocaine. Wow, what a combo, huh? I think somebody was commenting about the early one of the early ads on that was some about add some pep to your life. Okay. Anyway, um, it was kind of used as a, from what I understand, a mood enhancer. Yeah, it didn't feel good. Have some Coke. It was going to pick you up and make you feel good. So we also get dyes out of these, um, out of a lot of different roots. Yeah, there's a whole you can do a whole study of that. Ethnobotany, I think I mentioned before. Ethnobotany is one of my hobbies. I haven't devoted any time to it in years because any spare time right now seems to try to go to my PhD work. But after I finished my master's, before I started my PhD, I spent several years doing a lot of reading and enjoying ethnobotany. And yeah, it's amazing, the stuff that our ancestors used plants for that we don't even think about nowadays. Um, of course, drugs. Um, yeah, um, aconite, that can be pretty dangerous. I'm not really sure what that's used for in a good sense. Epicac. Epicac is something that you would take to induce vomiting. Okay, you go to like a health food store and you can buy a homeopathic that has Epicac in it. And if you have an upset stomach and you know you just need to get rid of it, but you can't. So you've eaten something wrong and you need to throw it up and you just can't. You can take some Ipecac and then you'll get rid of it. Gentian, I think it's a nerve calmer, I believe. Respirine, I don't really know. Sounds like probably has something to do with respiratory, but I would be guessing on that for sure. And then insecticide, rotenone, okay, is originally a plant derivative. I think we use synthetic version of it now, but that's a plant derived um, insecticide. A lot of plants have produced chemicals that protect themselves from insects. And so if we can identify easily that that's like one substance, which when you get to plants, sometimes it's not just one substance that you're looking at. It's a combination of chemicals that work together for the effect. And then that gets hard for us to re- reproduce synthetically or cheaply, um, to where we can market it and use it. So I was looking up here. What the natural source of rotenone is. I want to say that's the black walnut. I don't know. I was thinking that there was one that you could extract out of like black walnut hulls, um, and rotenone is one. It comes out of plant source, and of a lot of like the ancient or native, okay, cultures used it to fish. Okay, you put a little rotenone in there in the extract in the water, it'll paralyze the fish temporarily, and you can just go net them up. Reduces your fishing time a lot. Of course, it's like illegal to use nowadays, but you know, in the past and survival and all of that, and that was common. Um, and I was thinking that was I don't know. Anyway, another one that comes out of plants too that's not listed here is pyrethrum. Pyrethrum is an insect, natural insecticide. If you're doing organic plant growth, you can use pyrethrum, and that comes from chrysanthemums. Okay, that's their natural anti-pesticide they produce, and we can extract that and use it. And you'll see that if you read um, ingredient lists on like natural insecticides. Pyrethrin is usually the number one um, ingredient on those. Okay, so that ends off our topic of roots, and now we're into soils. Um, yeah, I think I said this the other day. This is one of my areas that I haven't really thought about in a while, so I may wind up finding I'm going to have to go do some review. But I used to teach this class, or I taught the labs to this class. Dr. Morrill was my soil science instructor at OSU, and I remember seeing that I had to take soils, and I thought, yuck, what a boring class. I don't want to study about dirt, you know. And so I decided to take it in the summer because I usually it was available in the summer. And anything that was available in the summer that I thought was going to be a class that I would not enjoy or was going to be kind of difficult for me, I would take it in the summer so that I would concentrate completely on it for 8 weeks, just focus, get it over with, and yeah, be be tortured with it for 8 weeks instead of 16. And like I said, if I thought it was going to be difficult too, like so I took some of my like calculus in the summer. Okay. So I took this first soils class, and of course, first day he comes in, he says it's not dirt, it's soil. There's a difference, yeah. But he just didn't let us use the term dirt. It's soil, and uh, the first chapter of the book, I got the book. Actually, I got the book ahead of time. I read the first, like, I don't know, 5 chapters before the first day of class, and all that. And so I went to the first day of class realizing that this was not the class I expected it to be. This class was a lot of geology. And we talked about rocks and the formations and how soils formed. And I was fascinated. Okay. So even before first day of class, like I said, I went in, I'd already had a little bit of an attitude change about the class. It's like, wow, okay, this might be interesting. And it was. I loved it. If I just hadn't been as fascinated with genetics as I was, I possibly could have changed my major and become a soil scientist. And so I could, as an option for graduation credit, take the second class, and I did. I took the second class and loved it. And at the end of that semester, well, a little before the end of that semester, about halfway through, Dr. Morrill caught me one day going out the door. He says, "Why don't you come teach my labs for me next semester?" Because I was graduating and I was going to stay in the department as a grad student. And I'm just like, yeah, I'll do that. Because labs were fun too, and I think we might have some equipment to do some of these soils labs I can if we get back on campus sometime. So I'll probably try at least have us do one if I can find the equipment for it of these because they're kind of cool. Or at least I think they are. But then it's me. So what forms soil? Soil is formed through the interaction of climate, what's called parent material, and that boils down to basically kind of the type of rock that it's going to come out of. Topography, vegetation, living organisms, and time. So those of you from my biology class last semester, you'll remember me saying that soil is made when rocks break down. And I talked about how we had these pioneer plant species that would come in and actually help in soil formation out of bare rock. They could live on bare rock. And I talked a lot about volcanic rock and things like that. So yeah, that's where we're going here. That's your parent material. What kind of rock is it? Is it parent rock? Is it volcanic? Is it something else? Um, the solid portion of soil consists of minerals and organic matter, and then the pore spaces between the solid particles are going to be filled with air or water.